Welcome to Fear Spiral, the place where the darkest corners of the night come alive, and reality feels just a little too close to the terrifying unknown. Here, we share true-style horror stories, the kind that make you double-check your doors at 2 a.m., the kind that leave you questioning every creak, every shadow, every sound in the silence. Tonight, we're diving into 10 chilling tales. Strangers lurking at windows, mysterious knocks at lonely motel doors. Shadows moving just out of reach, and encounters so real, you'll feel them behind your eyes long after the story ends. Each story is true style, immersive, and designed to make your skin crawl. So lock your doors, turn off the lights, and follow me down the spiral. If you dare. Because once you step into the fear spiral, there's no turning back. And sometimes, the fear follows you home. The knocking outside my trailer. I don't usually talk about this night. Not because I don't remember it clearly, but because remembering it too clearly is the problem. The memory plays out like a film I can't shut off, one that always pauses on the worst moments and forces me to relive them in complete clarity. This happened in late winter of 2019. When I was living alone in a small, aging camper trailer just outside Winslow, Arizona. I was 23 at the time, working a temporary trail maintenance job for a conservation group. It wasn't a glamorous job, mostly hauling brush, setting markers, fixing fences, but it paid just enough to survive. And they provided housing, which meant I didn't have to sign a lease or waste what little money I had. The housing wasn't a cabin, or a bunkhouse, or even a shared trailer. It was an old, white, sun-baked camper parked on a gravel lot beside a storage shed full of tools and supplies. There were no other residents on the property. The nearest house was half a mile down a dirt road, and after that, nothing but desert, rock, and stunted brush. The nearest streetlight was back on the highway, at least a 10-minute walk away. The organization said they'd once had more trailers on the property, but people complained about the isolation. I never understood why until that night. I'd gotten used to the quiet. The wind was constant, rattling the thin aluminum walls at night. Coyotes howled often enough that their cries blended into the background noise. Even when they got close sometimes right outside the trailer, I shrugged it off. What I wasn't used to was cold. That winter was weirdly harsh, with nighttime temperatures dropping below freezing almost every night. The little electric space heater I had barely kept the place livable. The night everything happened, I stayed up late watching downloaded movies on my laptop. No internet, barely any cell signal. I remember glancing at the time on my screen. It was 2:26 a.m. The wind had started to die down, leaving this uncomfortable silence that made every little sound seem magnified. I paused the movie for a moment, just to listen. The trailer felt unusually still, like the air itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it light crunching on gravel, coming from the direction of the open desert behind the trailer. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, measured steps. Someone walking like they didn't want to be noticed. At first, I assumed animal. But these footsteps had weight to them, not the skittering of javelinas or the cautious steps of coyotes. This sounded like a person. I sat up, pulled off my headphones, and listened harder. The steps stopped. Silence again. I waited, expecting them to start up again or fade away, but nothing happened for almost a full minute. Then came 3 knocks. Knock, knock. They weren't loud or aggressive, they were disturbingly gentle. Like someone testing whether I was awake. My body's reaction came before my thoughts did. Every muscle tensed. My breathing stopped. My heart kicked into overdrive immediately, pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. If anything, I sat more still, like prey trying not to be noticed. Another 30 seconds passed. Then a man's voice, soft, calm, almost monotone, spoke from the other side of the door. "Hey, you awake? Could use some help." My car broke down. A normal person, stranded in freezing temperatures in the middle of nowhere, should sound desperate. Out of breath, cold, panicked. This guy sounded like he was standing in line at a grocery store, making casual small talk that my mouth went dry. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. Even before I rationalized it, there had been no headlights earlier. No engine, no door closing. And in that terrain, you don't just walk up without making more noise. I didn't answer. He knocked again, same slow rhythm. This time, I whispered, barely a breath, "Please go." Not that he could hear me. I crawled quietly to one of the side windows, the one that faced the open lot, and slowly lifted the edge of the blind, just enough to see outside. The moon was bright that night, lighting up the gravel and brush clearly. There was a man standing about 15 feet away, facing directly toward the window I was peeking through, as if he knew I would look. Tall, thin, wearing a hooded jacket, hands in his pockets. He wasn't moving, just staring. I dropped the blind instantly and scrambled backward, knocking into the mini dash fridge dot. My pulse was so fast it felt every beat shook my body. I kept telling myself, probably just someone lost. Probably just needs help. But some part of me knew better. There had been no car, and even if there had been, why move away from the door, stand in the dark, and stare into my window? Minutes went by. I sat with my back to the counter, knees pulled up to my chest, trying not to make a sound. My hands were shaking violently from adrenaline and cold the heater had cut off earlier, and the temperature inside the trailer was dropping fast. Then, I heard footsteps circling the trailer slowly, crunch, crunch, crunch. One full lap, then another. By the second lap, the steps were closer to the walls. Every time he reached the door, he stopped and did the same slow knocking dot at 2:54 a.m. The voice returned, even calmer than before. "Come on, man. It's freezing. Seriously, you can at least open the door and talk to me." He sounded like someone disguising irritation behind forced politeness. It wasn't pleading. It was controlled, measured, like someone who was waiting me out. I stayed hidden. The footsteps stopped again, this time right outside the window nearest the counter, less than 2 feet away from me. The thin wall did almost nothing to block the sound. I heard him breathing, slow and steady, not shivering or struggling like someone freezing outside. Then came the sound of metal dragging across the trailer's exterior. A long scraping line from one window to the back corner. Like he was tracing its shape. I clenched the small pocket knife I had, knowing damn well it wouldn't save me if he got in. Then everything went silent again. Silence is worse than noise. Silence means he could be anywhere. It stayed like that for maybe 10 minutes, 10 long, unbearable minutes before the calm tone vanished, replaced with 4 violent, explosive bangs. Bam! 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 He hit the door so hard the hinges rattled. I flinched so hard I hit my head on the counter and had to cover my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. He tried the handle next, jiggling it, not yanking like he wanted in, but testing, like he wanted to know whether I'd locked it. Then, quietly, he said, "You should have answered the first time." There was nothing theatrical about the way he said it. It didn't sound like a threat shouted by someone angry. It sounded like a disappointed observation that somehow made it worse. He stayed outside until sometime after 4. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat there, knife in my hand, listening for movement. Around 4:07 a.m., I heard footsteps finally fading away across the gravel, heading back into the desert. I waited another hour before even moving from the floor. When dawn finally came, I stepped outside cautiously. The sunlight made everything feel less threatening, but the evidence was still there. Footprints circled the trailer over and over, dozens of loops in different distances from the walls. Near the door and windows, the gravel was disturbed heavily, like someone pacing. There were long scratches down the metal, some straight, some curved. None deep enough to be from a blade, more like someone dragging a key or piece of metal lightly. But there were no tire tracks. No prints leading toward the lot, only prints leading away, toward a patch of brush and sand. Whoever it was, they hadn't arrived in a car, I told my supervisor later that morning. He looked concerned, but clearly didn't want responsibility. Locals sometimes mess with campers, he said, shrugging. Probably just someone drunk. But this wasn't drunken behavior. Drunk people don't stand silently for hours circling a trailer. They don't whisper calmly through freezing temperatures. They don't stare into windows without announcing themselves properly. I quit the job the next month and moved 2 states away. I haven't slept on ground level since. I have cameras, motion lights, pepper spray by the door, none of which make me feel safe. The worst part isn't the knocking, or the voice, or even the footsteps. It's knowing that if I hadn't paused that movie right when I did, I might not have heard anything. I might have opened the door out of instinct, thinking someone from work needed help. Sometimes late at night, when the wind rattles the siding of my apartment and everything goes quiet, I swear I hear that rhythm again, not loud, just soft and patient. Knock. Knock, knock. And every time I sit frozen. Just like that night in the trailer, afraid to move or speak. Because I still don't know what he wanted. But I know one thing for sure. He wasn't looking for help. He was looking for an open door. The knocks in the empty mall. I've been working night security for almost 3 years. Mostly for small office buildings and storage facilities. But the first time I ever worked an overnight shift in a mall, a huge, multi-level shopping center that had closed for renovations, I got a taste of just how unnerving the night can be when a place designed for crowds is completely empty. The mall itself was in suburban Illinois, and it had been partially shuttered for months. Only a few stores were still operating, mainly a grocery and a 24-hour convenience store near the north entrance. The rest of the place had been vacated. My company was contracted to monitor the property overnight, making rounds every hour, checking doors, cameras, and alarms. I was 26 at the time, the kind of guy who usually thinks he can handle anything, until the night I'm about to tell you. It was a mid-October Thursday, around 11:45 p.m., when I first arrived. The parking lot was empty except for my beat-up Ford Escape and a lone security truck idling near the front entrance. The air smelled of damp asphalt and the faint hint of burnt popcorn from the small 24-hour store, which still had a handful of employees cleaning and restocking. The wind was sharp that night, whipping around the side of the mall in odd gusts that made the floodlights flicker intermittently. I remember thinking how much quieter it was than usual. Normally, even at night, a mall retains some echo, some distant hum from refrigeration units or the ventilation system. But that night, everything sounded hollow. I unlocked the front doors and stepped into the mall. The automatic sensors didn't work anymore, so the doors made a dull metallic squeak as they opened. My flashlight beam cut across empty floors, the tiles cold and reflecting the dim emergency lights. My walkie crackled occasionally with static, but no one responded. This was normal. Most of the other security guards on the overnight shifts were in different sections, and I often had the mall to myself. I began my first round, starting at the north end near the convenience store. Everything was in order. Doors locked, cameras functioning, no signs of break-ins. As I moved toward the center court, I passed the food court. Chairs were stacked neatly on tables, and the neon signs in some of the remaining storefronts buzzed faintly. That's when I first noticed it, a knock, soft, single, coming from what sounded like the back service door of the vacant electronics store near the central atrium. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck, a stray maintenance worker, or even a raccoon that had gotten inside. I paused, shining my flashlight toward the door. Nothing. The knock didn't repeat immediately. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I stepped closer and tapped the door with my knuckles. Nothing inside. I waited 10 seconds, holding my breath, and then continued my patrol. I chalked it up to old building noises doors, pipes settling. The mall was over 30 years old. The night went on like that for a few hours. I made rounds, checked cameras, scribbled notes on my log, and even ate some snacks I'd brought. Around 2:13 a.m., I was near the old department store wing, far from the entrances, when I heard it again. Knocks, 3 slow, deliberate knocks, almost rhythmic. Knock, knock. Knock. My stomach dropped. This wasn't the kind of noise that came from old walls or metal doors. This sounded human. I froze in the middle of the tile floor, scanning with my flashlight. Nothing. The echo of the knocks faded into the emptiness, but it left an unnatural weight in the air. My heart raced. I told myself it was probably a bored security guard pulling a prank, but the building had been largely empty for months. There was no one to prank me. I called over the radio to the control room. Northwest wing, over. Static, nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. That made me tense. Usually, the control room staff checked in at least once per hour to see how the shifts were going. Continued slowly toward the source of the knocking, the electronics store. My flashlight flickered across the glass doors. Everything was empty inside. Shelves were stripped bare. The cashier desk overturned and covered in dust. No doors were unlocked. Nothing moved. I knocked lightly on the glass. Silence. And then it happened again, but this time from the opposite direction. Knock, 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 behind me. The sound echoed down the long, empty hallway. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the corridor. Shadows danced along the walls in the flickering emergency lights. The hallway was empty. My pulse was racing now. I wanted to rationalize it, air ducts rattling. Loose signage, but the sound had come from ground level, unmistakably sharp and close. Like someone was deliberately knocking on doors. I switched on the walkie and called for backup. Control, do you copy? Static. No response. I started walking quickly toward the main security office, flashlight scanning every corner, expecting to see a coworker joking behind a wall. But no one was there. The mall felt oppressive, almost alive in its silence. My flashlight's beam reflected off shiny tile floors and glossy store windows. But it was like looking into empty eyes, windows showing nothing but blackness. Around 2:47 a.m., I decided to check the loading docks. The mall's rear entrance had roll-up doors for deliveries. I pulled one open slightly, flashlight ahead. Nothing, not a sound. And yet, a minute later, 3 knocks sounded from inside the dock area. Knock, knock, knock. I stepped inside, heart hammering, shining the light across crates and pallets. No one, no footprints. The doors were locked behind me. I double-checked, sweating, my breath misting in the cold air. I was about to call it a night, telling myself I was letting fatigue make me imagine things, when I heard a voice, low, calm. Hey, you awake? I froze mid-step. The voice wasn't coming through the radio. It came from the hallway behind me, soft, deliberate. I spun, pointing the flashlight, and the beam landed on a shadow, just for an instant, shifting along the far wall. It disappeared instantly. I stepped forward cautiously. Who's there? I said, voice quivering more than I wanted. No response. Only silence. Then the knocking returned. From the wall to my left. Then the wall behind me. Then the metal doors of the loading dock. Knock, 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 slower, measured. Not frantic. Not random, almost. Patient. My rational mind screamed at me. The mall was empty. I checked every camera feed. Empty. Every floor. Empty. Yet the sound persisted. Moving from one location to another, almost like it was stalking me. Knowing my path, I felt my hands shake, flashlight nearly dropping. Adrenaline slammed my heart against my chest. I wasn't a kid. I had dealt with drunk tenants, aggressive panhandlers, even a shoplifter with a knife, but this was different. Silent, calculated, untraceable. I decided to barricade myself in the security office. Keyed the door, locked it, turned on every monitor. Everything on the cameras looked normal, empty, motionless. The silence was absolute, except for a faint static hum from the monitors. And then, I heard it again. A single knock this time, right on the office door. Knock, I jumped. My flashlight fell to the floor, rolling under my desk. I bent down to grab it, keeping my eyes on the door. The knocking continued, soft and slow. Knock, 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 I shouted. Who's there? Silence. I grabbed my radio again. Dead. I tried the emergency phone line dead. The mall felt sealed off from the world. The lights in the hallway outside the office flickered and then went out completely, leaving me in semi-darkness. The knock stopped suddenly. My ears were ringing. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I strained to hear anything, every creak of the building, every faint buzz of electricity magnified. Then, faintly behind the office, I heard the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving across tile. Stopping just beyond my door. I held my breath, flashlight shaking in my hands. Minutes passed. Nothing. I forced myself to call the control room one last time. Silence. Finally, just before 4:15 a.m., the lights returned. The building seemed normal. The knocking and footsteps had stopped. My relief was immediate but shallow. My hands still shook. I logged my patrols for the rest of the shift, eyes constantly darting to the door, imagining shadows moving. I didn't hear the knocking again until the next night, and it wasn't the same the second night. The second night, the knocks didn't start until I was alone in the central atrium, standing by the fountains. The sound didn't come from doors. It came from inside the walls. Tap, 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 slow, precise. And again, my monitor showed nothing. Empty corridors. No one. I eventually quit the mall job. I couldn't take it anymore. Every time I close my eyes at night, I hear those slow, patient knocks echoing in my head. And I know it's not a trick of the mind, it's the memory of someone. Or something, waiting for me to be alone, waiting to make me respond, even now. When I pass a mall at night or hear a faint knock on a door, I tense up. My heartbeat spikes. I know somehow that whatever was inside that empty mall, it wasn't a person looking for trouble. It was something else, waiting for me to make a mistake. And maybe, if I ever went back, it would still be there, knocking. The cabin at Black Pine Lake. I'll never forget the winter I spent alone at Black Pine Lake. I was 24, recently graduated, and trying to disconnect for a few weeks. I rented a small off-grid cabin through a friend who knew the area. The place was rustic but livable, a single story with a loft wood-burning stove and a wraparound porch. The nearest town was 20 miles away, and the road leading to the cabin was little more than a snow-packed dirt trail. The owners warned me, don't go out at night unless you absolutely have to. And if you hear knocking, don't answer. I laughed, thinking it was just the old woods folklore locals love to tell. I was wrong. I arrived just after sunset, around 5:45 p.m., with the sky darkening and the first flakes of snow beginning to fall. The cabin smelled faintly of pine and soot, from the residual fire the last redders had left. I unpacked, stacked firewood, and got a small fire going in the wood stove. Snow fell heavier outside, blanketing the surrounding pines. It was peaceful, beautiful, even. But there was also a palpable isolation, no other cabins in sight, no distant lights. Just the forest and the lake, both invisible under the night sky, I spent the evening reading and drinking coffee, feeling my city life stress melt away. Around 10:30 p.m., I decided to check the windows before bed. That's when I heard it, first faint, then louder. 3 taps. Not on the window, not on the porch railing, but on the front door. Slow, deliberate, tap. Tap, tap. I froze. The door was solid wood, old but sturdy. The cabin's front porch was covered in snow, and as far as I could see, no footprints led up to it. I laughed nervously to myself. Probably a branch hitting the door in the wind, I muttered. But the wind was calm. Almost eerily still. I tried to ignore it, thinking I was imagining things. But then I heard the knocks again, this time from the side window of the living room. Tap, tap, tap. I froze completely. The sound was patient, not random. Someone was trying to get my attention. Who's there? I called, my voice shaky. No answer. Silence, except for the faint creak of the cabin settling. I considered calling the owners, but cell service was spotty. The nearest tower barely registered. My heart started pounding. I told myself to stay calm, maybe a neighbor had come by mistake. But there were no neighbors. The cabin was at least a mile from the nearest road cleared for cars. Around 11:12 p.m., I got a better look at the snow-covered porch. There were footprints. Bare, almost impossibly long, pressed into the snow in front of the door. They weren't human. The toes were elongated and splayed. I remember staring for a long time, trying to convince myself they were a trick of the light. But the prints didn't fade. They ended right at the door, and there were no signs of a trail leading away. I sat in the living room with the fire roaring, trying to keep warm. Every few minutes, I thought I heard soft scraping at the door or porch. Once, I thought I heard a low whisper. My imagination, I told myself. I shouldn't be alone in the woods for more than a few nights. The solitude was already playing tricks on me. Around 1:03 a.m., the knocks returned. This time, the pattern was different. 4 slow taps on the door, a pause, then 3 on the window. I couldn't rationalize it anymore. Someone or something was outside. I grabbed a fireplace poker and crept to the window, pressing my face to the glass. I could see the faint outline of a figure in the snow, standing still, back straight. Its face was hidden by shadows, but its hands were at its sides, oddly still. I stepped back, my body trembling. "Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted. No response, just another round of taps, softer this time. My instinct screamed at me not to open the door, not to let whatever it was inside. The knocking continued intermittently until about 2:30 a.m., each time coming from a different location. The front door, the side window, the back porch. I didn't move from the living room. I stayed crouched, poker in hand, listening. The wind started to pick up outside, howling through the trees. The snow drifted against the windows. Then I heard something I couldn't ignore, a soft scraping from the roof above me. Something was moving across the cabin's roof, stepping slowly, methodically. My pulse hit over 100. My breathing became shallow. I remembered the owner's words, "If you hear knocking, don't answer." I understood why now. Around 3:05 a.m., the sound of knocking stopped for several minutes. I thought maybe it had gone. Then, I heard it again, this time from the loft ladder behind me. Tap, 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 slow, steady. I slowly turned my head, expecting to see an intruder, but the loft was empty. Nothing, just shadows. I decided I couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. I bundled myself in my heaviest coat, grabbed the small camping axe I kept near the fire, and stepped outside into the snow around 3:22 a.m. The air was sharp, stinging my lungs. The porch was empty, the snow disturbed only by my footprints and the odd prints I had seen earlier. The forest was silent, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I circled the cabin slowly, keeping my eyes peeled. I couldn't see anyone. No lights, no movement. And yet, I knew I wasn't alone. The woods themselves felt alive, the shadows stretching unnaturally. Every crack of a branch, every gust of wind made my nerves fray. I returned to the cabin reluctantly, hoping that daylight would come soon. I stayed awake near the fire, axe ready, until the sun's pale light began creeping through the trees. Around 6:15 a.m., I cautiously stepped outside. The snow had stopped, leaving everything quiet and still. That's when I saw it. The door had deep, vertical scratches, as if something had tried to force its way inside. And in the snow in front of the door, the prints were gone. Completely gone. No trail leading away. I packed up and left that same morning. I never returned. I told the owner I had changed plans, and they didn't ask further. I don't know what was outside that cabin that night, or how it moved so quietly and left no trace. To this day, I avoid cabins in remote areas. I avoid being alone in the woods. But sometimes, when winter winds howl outside, or when I'm somewhere quiet, I hear it in my mind, the slow, deliberate tapping of something at a door, waiting for me to answer. I never answer. The man on Route 47. I'll never forget the night I was driving home from my cousin's wedding in late November. Around 11:30 p.m., I was 25 at the time, tired but still buzzing from the evening's festivities. I was taking Route 47, a long, mostly abandoned highway that cuts through miles of cornfields and patches of forest in central Illinois. By the time I passed the last town, all the streetlights disappeared, and the only illumination came from my headlights slicing through the darkness. The radio was off, my phone had a weak signal, and there was nothing around for miles. Just me, my old sedan, and the road stretching endlessly ahead. I remember thinking how peaceful it was at first. The air was crisp, just above freezing, and a light fog rolled over the pavement, curling around the trees. I turned on my low beams and drove slowly. Then, at 12:05 a.m., I saw him. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, a man standing by the edge of the road, thumb out. But the way he was positioned was strange. He wasn't holding a backpack, a coat, or even a flashlight. He was just standing, completely still, shoulders slightly slouched, arms hanging loose, face obscured by shadows. He wasn't moving even as I slowed down. I rolled the window down and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" He didn't respond. Just stood there, looking in my direction. My stomach tightened. Normally, even a stranger would at least wave or nod. Instead, there was a strange patience in his stillness, like he had all the time in the world. I hesitated, debating whether to stop. The road was completely deserted, the fog thickening. I didn't want to risk it, but something inside me told me that ignoring him might not be safe either. Finally, I pulled over a few feet ahead in a small clearing along the roadside. My headlights washed over him. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. I unlocked the doors, still in my car, and leaned slightly forward. "Do you need a ride?" I asked. Again, nothing. Silence. Then I heard a knock, slow, from the passenger side door. My heart skipped a beat. I shook my head, thinking it was a branch scraping the side of the car in the fog. But the sound repeated. Knock, knock. Not. This time I noticed something terrifying. My windows were up, the doors locked. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't doing a normal knock. It was deliberate, methodical. And I could feel the pressure of it, like it wasn't just sound but something tapping into my skull. Forcing me to acknowledge it, I locked the doors again, even though they already were, and tried to start the car. Nothing. Engine cranked but didn't turn over. Panic started bubbling in my chest. I hit the steering wheel. Come on, come on. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, there was only the hum of the fog around me, the faint rustle of the corn in the fields. Then, from the rear passenger side, another knock. This one heavier, like someone was pressing with the side of a fist, not the knuckles. I looked around frantically. Fog masked everything. I couldn't see a movement in the trees, the corn, or along the road. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then, softly, a voice low, calm, almost bored, whispered through the fog. "Come on. I just need to get in." I froze. My pulse was hammering in my ears. The voice was human, but there was something wrong about it. Too even, too patient, like someone used to waiting. I tried unlocking the doors again. Nothing. The handle on the driver's side rattled slightly. But the doors stayed shut. Then I saw him move. Not walking, not running, sliding. His body seemed to glide along the fog, approaching the passenger side. My stomach dropped. I slammed the car in reverse, hitting the accelerator. Tires spun, fog whipped past, headlights cutting through a wall of white. I kept driving, trying to put as much distance as possible between me and him. I didn't dare look back. The highway twisted, narrow and isolated. I didn't see another car for miles. Around 12:45 a.m., I thought I'd escaped. My heart was still racing, hands shaking on the wheel. That's when I heard it again. A knock from inside the car. My head snapped down. Windows were still up, doors still locked. Knock. Knock, knock. My breath hitched. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Fog. Darkness. Then the passenger side. Mirror moved slightly. Reflected in it was a shadow, crouched close to the glass. Staring straight at me. I panicked, slamming on the brakes. My tires skidded over frost patches. I wanted to jump out, but I knew I'd be defenseless. Instead, I hit the gas, weaving along the highway. Terrified I might run off the road into the ditch. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow was gone. I drove the rest of the way without stopping. Heart pounding, hands white on the wheel. When I finally reached my apartment around 1:15 a.m., I didn't turn the lights off. I checked all doors, double-locked them, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I went online to check for any reports of hitchhikers or prowlers on Route 47. Nothing. No incidents, no warnings. And yet, I know what I saw. I don't drive that highway at night anymore. Even in daylight, I avoid it. But sometimes on quiet nights, when the wind hits my window or the shadows from the trees stretch along the road, I swear I hear it again. 3 slow knocks, patient, deliberate, waiting for someone to stop. And I know that if I ever did, I wouldn't make it out. The room next door. I was 23 and driving cross-country to start a new job in Oregon. It was late October, and I'd been on the road for almost 12 hours straight. Around 1:10 a.m., my car finally gave out about 50 miles outside the next town. I had no choice but to pull into the first motel I saw. A faded, neon vacancy sign flickering in the dark. It wasn't much. Paint peeling, fluorescent lights buzzing, a cracked parking lot. But it was warm, and I was exhausted. I checked in with a tired clerk, got my key, and headed to room 12. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and cigarette smoke. My shoes echoed on the linoleum floor. The room itself was small. A double bed, a tiny bathroom, a cheap desk, and a window with half-closed curtains. The heater worked, but it rattled like it might collapse at any moment. I locked the door, checked the deadbolt twice, and collapsed on the bed. I tried to relax, scrolling on my phone, but the weak signal barely loaded anything. Around 2:15 a.m., I started hearing it, soft tapping. At first, I thought it was the heater rattling, or maybe the rain against the window. There was a light drizzle outside. But the tapping repeated. 3 slow, deliberate taps on the wall closest to the adjoining room. Tap. Tap, tap. I froze. My heart picked up instantly. I hadn't heard anyone check in on this floor. The hallway was silent. I put my ear to the wall. Nothing, no voices, no movement. I told myself it was nothing. The building was old. Pipes, settling walls, wind. But my instinct screamed otherwise. The pattern wasn't random. Someone or something was deliberately making a noise against the wall. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard a low knock at the door itself. Knock. Knock, knock. I bolted upright. My door was locked. I checked. Deadbolt engaged. Nothing could get in. My pulse raced. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Only silence. I grabbed my phone to call the front desk, but there was no signal. I couldn't even call 911. My breathing grew shallow. Every little sound from the building pipes creaking, the rain tapping against the roof felt magnified. Then the knocking returned, louder this time. 4 taps on the wall, a pause, then 2 on the door. Soft, patient, intentional. I could feel it reverberate through the thin motel walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping a metal lamp from the desk. I told myself to calm down. "It's probably a neighbor," I muttered. "Maybe some guy in the next room. Drunk, tapping. Nothing serious." But then I remembered, the key I had was for room 12. The room next door, 11, had a lock and a deadbolt too. I had seen no one enter. The hallway was empty. And the knocking every time was measured, like someone knew I was listening. Around 3 a.m., I finally got up to investigate. I cracked the door and peeked into the hallway. Dim light flickered from the ceiling fixtures, showing peeling paint and stained carpet. The hallway was empty. I stepped into the hallway slowly. Every step echoed. I held the lamp in front of me like a weapon. Nothing. I crept to room 11, the source of the wall taps. The door was locked, as expected. But then I noticed something odd. Faint scratches around the frame, almost as if someone had been trying to open it from the inside or outside, without a key. My stomach turned. I knocked lightly on the door. No answer. No sounds inside at all. I backed away, heart hammering, and returned to my room. I told myself to forget it. Try to sleep. But at 3:18 a.m., a single knock came from inside my room. Not the door. From the wall. Knock. I spun toward the wall. The knocks continued. They weren't random. Each one hit in a distinct rhythm. Tap, pause. Tap, pause. Tap. I swear, at that moment, I could feel a presence just behind the wall, inches away, watching. My skin crawled. I moved the bed closer to the door and sat with my back against it, lamp held tightly, listening. The tapping didn't stop. It continued for an hour, irregular now, louder in some spots, lighter in others, almost as if someone was pacing. My eyes were fixed on the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. At 4:35 a.m., the knock stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every creak in the building sounded like a step approaching my door. Minutes passed. The room felt colder. My teeth chattered. Around 5 a.m., I finally drifted into a light sleep, lamp still clutched to my chest. When I woke around 7:15 a.m., the sunlight filtering through the curtains, I cautiously checked the room. Everything seemed normal. The wall showed no new marks. The door was locked. Room 11 was empty. I packed my things and checked out immediately. At the front desk, I asked about who had stayed in 11 last night. The clerk frowned. "No one. That room hasn't been rented in weeks. We usually keep it locked for repairs." I didn't argue. I just nodded, paid, and left. I didn't look back. Even now, months later, whenever I stay in a cheap motel, I can't shake the memory of those knocks. Slow, deliberate, waiting, patient. I don't know if it was a person or something else. But I do know this. If you hear 3 taps on the wall in a deserted room at night, don't investigate. Don't even breathe. Just wait and hope it stops before it finds a way in. The neighbor who wasn't there. I had just turned 27, living alone for the first time in a small 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago. It was a Friday night in late March, around 11:50 p.m., and the city was alive with the usual hum of traffic, sirens, and distant music. My apartment was on the 12th floor of a mid-century building, old but secure. The walls were thin though, and I could usually hear the faint hum of neighbors in other units. That night though, it was quiet, too quiet. I had spent the evening working on a freelance project, laptop balanced on my knees, the TV muted but glowing softly. Around 12:05 a.m., I heard it for the first time. A single deliberate knock on my apartment door. I froze mid-typing. Knock. I told myself it was probably a neighbor or a maintenance worker. I glanced at the clock, then at the door. Peering through the peephole revealed nothing. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by the flickering fluorescent lights of the corridor. I unlocked the door slightly and cracked it open. Nothing. Silence. I shrugged and closed the door, telling myself it was the building settling, or maybe my imagination. But then it happened again, this time. 2 knocks, slower, heavier. Knock. Knock, and my pulse quickened. I reached for my phone to call the front desk, but my battery was low, and the signal was weak. The hallway lights flickered. My apartment felt colder suddenly, though the heater was still on. I tried to convince myself to ignore it. Just someone pulling a prank, right? Around 12:30 a.m., I was making coffee in the kitchen when I heard it again. 4 sharp knocks from the door. I froze, cup halfway to my lips. The knocks had a rhythm, a pattern, like someone was deliberately trying to get my attention. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint hum of the city outside. I glanced at my neighbor's door across the hall. Unit 12B. It had been empty for weeks. The previous tenant had moved out, and maintenance hadn't re-rented it yet. My heart sank. What if the knocking wasn't coming from a normal person? I grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly approached the door. Peered through the peephole. Empty hallway, nothing. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. Silence. Then it came again from inside the apartment, behind me. Tap, tap, tap on the wall, separating my bedroom from the living room. My stomach dropped. I live alone. No one else was in the apartment. I spun, knife raised, flashlight on. Nothing. The tapping continued, slow, patient, deliberate. My pulse was racing. I wanted to leave, but my car was in the underground garage, and I didn't dare go outside into the empty hall while this was happening. Around 1:15 a.m., the knocking moved, this time from the bedroom door. The door I had locked when I went to bed. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Every instinct screamed that I should run. I tried to rationalize. Old building, creaking walls, maybe the wind. But my apartment was sealed, quiet. This was deliberate. Someone or something was outside my door. I called the front desk finally. "Hello. Hi, this is 12A. I think someone is outside my door." There was silence on the line, static, then a click. Dead. I tried again. Dead. My mind raced. I checked every window locked, every door locked. I even checked the fire escape locked. The knocking continued intermittently, moving between the front door and the bedroom door, sometimes along the living room walls. Each knock had a rhythm, like it was testing me, taunting me. At 2 a.m., I decided to record the sounds with my phone. Maybe I could play it back, see if it was normal. I pressed record, and the knocking started again. This time loud, fast, urgent. Tap dash tap dash tap dash tap. It moved from the front door to the walls, echoing inside my apartment. I watched the recording, but when I played it back, there was nothing, just faint static. I couldn't take it anymore. I backed into the bedroom, shutting the door behind me. I clutched the knife, sitting against the wall, eyes darting between the front door and the bedroom door. Around 3:05 a.m., the knocking stopped. Complete silence. My ears rang. My pulse finally slowed, though the adrenaline left me shaking. I stayed awake until sunrise, watching the peephole. When the morning came, I cautiously opened the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. No footprints, no signs of anyone having been there. Unit 12B was still empty. I moved out the next week. I couldn't live with that fear, that feeling that someone or something had been testing me, waiting for me to respond. And even now, months later, I still check the door twice before sleeping, and any strange noise in the walls makes my skin crawl. I still don't know who or what was outside my apartment that night, and I don't think I want to. Empty hall, knocking sound. I had just finished my second year of college and decided to stay on campus over winter break to catch up on a few online courses. Most of the dorms were empty. Only a handful of students had returned early. I was living in a single room in an old dorm building, 4th floor, with long hallways and flickering fluorescent lights. It was December, around 11:40 p.m., and the campus was silent. The snow outside reflected the dim light from the street lamps, giving the hallways an eerie glow whenever I looked out the window. I spent the evening studying, headphones in, coffee at my desk. The dorm felt empty, too quiet. Usually, even during breaks, there's a faint hum of ventilation or distant footsteps of night staff. But that night, silence dominated. Around 12:05 a.m., I heard it, a soft knock, slow, deliberate, on my door. Knock. I froze, staring at the door. My roommate's side of the dorm was empty. He had gone home for the break. I was alone. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. The hallway remained silent. I tried to rationalize. Cleaning staff maybe, or a prank from another student who hadn't left yet. But the dorm was mostly empty. I waited a few minutes. Silence. Then the knocking returned. Faster this time, 3 short knocks. Knock, knock. Knock. My heart started to race. I got up and looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. Faint light flickered at the far end. No sign of anyone. I whispered, "Who's there?" Still nothing. Around 12:25 a.m., I decided to call the campus security desk. My phone had a weak signal, but the line connected. "Hello, this is Jordan in room 412, I said, my voice shaky. "I think someone's knocking on my door." "The hall is empty." There was a pause. Then a voice, calm, almost bored. "We'll check the hallway. Stay inside, locked, until we arrive." I thanked them and hung up. That was when I heard it again knocking, but this time from the wall adjacent to my desk. My chair scraped as I jumped. It wasn't a random thump. The sound was deliberate, slow, measuring the wall. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying to rationalize. The dorm was old. Pipes settling walls. Heating systems, but this was intentional. Someone or something was testing me. Around 12:55 a.m., I grabbed a desk lamp, turned it on, and approached the door cautiously. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. I cracked the peephole slightly. Nothing. No shadows, no movement. The hall remained empty, except for the occasional flicker of the lights and a draft that made the floor creak. I returned to my desk, hands trembling. That's when I heard the softest sound of all breathing. Not muffled through the wall, but faint, deliberate, almost imperceptible, coming from the hallway outside my door. My pulse spiked. I backed away, trying to stay calm. Around 1:15 a.m., I heard the knocking again. This time it was heavy. 3 sharp knocks on the door, then 4 on the wall next to it, then a single knock on the floor. My brain screamed at me, "Leave, call someone, run." I called security again. No answer. I called my parents. No signal. My laptop was dead. I was trapped. The knocking continued intermittent till 2:30 a.m. Every sound was deliberate, almost patient, moving from door to wall to floor. I stayed crouched by the bed, holding the desk lamp like a weapon. I could feel my chest tighten with every tap, every echo in the silent hall. Finally, at 3:05 a.m., the knocking stopped. Complete silence. My ears rang from the intensity of the sounds. My mind raced. The hallway remained empty. Unit doors all locked. The dorm quiet. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At sunrise, I cautiously opened my door. The hall was empty. The janitor passed by, whistling, and didn't notice anything unusual. I packed up my things and moved to the student center for the day. Trying not to think about the tapping, the measured, patient knocks that had come from nowhere, even now months later. If I'm alone in a hallway or hear a faint knock behind a door, I tense up. I don't know what was in that dorm that night, and I don't think I want to. I just know it was waiting, patient, deliberate, and it wasn't supposed to be there. The farmhouse at Hollow Creek. I was 28 and had just inherited my late uncle's farmhouse in rural Iowa. I decided to spend the first few nights there alone, fixing up the place before listing it for sale. It was early November, around 10:30 p.m., and the wind had picked up across the flat fields. The house was old, built in the 1920s, with a large front porch, peeling white paint, and windows that rattled with every gust. The nearest neighbor lived over a mile away, and the road to town was just a dirt trail. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked some tools, lit the fireplace, and listened to the wind howl across the empty fields. But around 11:45 p.m., as I was finishing dinner, I heard it. A soft knock on the front door. Knock. I froze, knife in hand. My uncle had left no key with anyone. I was alone. I approached the door slowly and peeked through the old brass peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty. Only the wind moving the leaves scattered across the steps. I shrugged, telling myself it was the wind or maybe an animal bumping against the door. But then it came again, louder. Knock. 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 My stomach tightened. The knocks were deliberate, steady, measured. Not random like the wind. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Silence. I checked the back of the house. Nothing. Windows were closed. The barn was empty. Only the wind and the night. Around 12:10 a.m., the knocks returned. This time from the kitchen door, which led to a small mudroom and back entrance. I froze. I had locked every door. No one should have been there. I grabbed a heavy wrench from the drawer and crept toward the kitchen, every step echoing in the empty house. I peeked through the small window next to the door. Nothing. Not a single shadow. No footprints in the yard, though the snow from earlier in the evening had left a light dusting. I told myself to calm down. Maybe it was a neighbor? But the closest house was over a mile away. No one could have approached without leaving tracks. The wind was too cold for anyone to be lingering outside for long. Around 12:45 a.m., I was in the living room, trying to convince myself I had imagined everything, when I heard it again, 3 sharp knocks, this time from the front door. I froze completely, heart racing, cold sweat on my back. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Only silence. Then, slowly, I heard a faint scraping along the porch, like something heavy moving across the wood. I grabbed a flashlight, flicked it on, and approached the door, wrench in hand. The porch was empty. No footprints. No movement. Just the dark expanse of the field beyond the lights of the porch. Around 1:15 a.m., I decided I couldn't stay in the main house anymore. I locked the front door, retreated to the upstairs bedroom, and kept the flashlight and wrench close. The knocking continued intermittently, sometimes the front door, sometimes the kitchen door, sometimes a soft tapping on the windows. Each sound was deliberate, methodical. My phone had no signal. I couldn't call anyone. My mind raced. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind, felt like it was masking the presence of something outside. At 2:30 a.m., the knocking stopped. The silence was almost unbearable. I stayed awake, clutching the wrench, listening. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps on the porch. Every shadow in the corner of the room seemed to stretch unnaturally. Around 3:10 a.m., I thought I saw movement outside the bedroom window. A silhouette, crouched near the edge of the porch. I froze, my heart jumped. It didn't move, didn't breathe. Just watched. I didn't dare open the window. By 4 a.m., I had fallen into a light, uneasy sleep, flashlight still in hand. When I woke around 6:30 a.m., the sunrise brought relief. The porch was empty. No footprints in the snow. No sign that anyone or anything had been there. I packed my tools, locked every door, and left the farmhouse that morning. I never returned. The thought of the deliberate, patient knocking, moving from door to door, wall to wall, still haunts me. Even now, when the wind howls across empty fields, I can't stop imagining it, that patient presence, waiting just beyond the door, measuring, watching, and knowing that if I had opened it, I wouldn't have made it out. The night shift. I was 26, working the graveyard shift at a storage warehouse on the outskirts of my city. It was mid-October, and the night was cold, fog rolling across the empty lot outside. The facility was massive rows of metal units stretching far back into darkness, with only a few security cameras and the dull glow of fluorescent lights in the main office. My job was simple: monitor security feeds, handle late-night rentals, and keep an eye on the building until morning. Around 11:50 p.m., I was sitting at my desk, sipping a coffee, the quiet hum of the security monitors filling the room. The warehouse was empty except for me and a few occasional deliveries that never seemed to come on time. That's when I heard it, a soft knock at the office door. Knock! I froze. The office door was a heavy metal door with a small glass window. I looked through it, but the lot outside was empty. I assumed it was a delivery, maybe someone late with a payment. I got up and opened the door cautiously. Nothing. The lot was deserted. Fog drifted across the asphalt, masking everything beyond a few feet. I returned to my desk, unsettled but trying to rationalize. The building was old. The metal siding creaked with the wind. Around 12:05 a.m., I heard it again, this time coming from the warehouse itself. Slow, deliberate knocking, echoing from one of the storage aisles. Knock. 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 I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the warehouse. The metal roof groaned under the wind. My footsteps echoed in the vast empty space. I scanned the rows of storage units, shining the light down every aisle. Nothing. No boxes moved. No shadows flickered. Yet the knocking continued, moving, deliberate, as if someone or something was pacing just out of sight. Around 12:20 a.m., I called the security office at the main headquarters. No answer. My phone had poor reception here, and my voice echoed across the empty warehouse, sounding absurdly loud in the silence. I tried the radio on my desk. Static. Dead. I returned to the main office, heart hammering. That's when the knocking escalated heavier, faster. It moved from the far end of the warehouse to the aisle closest to the office. Tap, 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 tap. And then a pause, like someone listening to see if I would react. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Maybe another employee, but no one else was scheduled tonight. And even if someone had managed to sneak in, how had they avoided every camera, every lock, every motion detector? Around 12:45 a.m., I heard a low scraping from the unit closest to the office metal, rubbing against metal, slow, deliberate. I approached cautiously, flashlight shaking in my hand. Nothing. I tried the handle on the unit. Locked. No movement inside. Then came the whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible, from somewhere in the warehouse. Come, open it. I spun, shining the flashlight down every aisle. The fog inside the warehouse generated from the heating system or the humid night air made everything blurry, shadowy. My pulse raced. I had been alone all night. No one else should have been here. At 1:10 a.m., the knocking shifted, this time on the office door. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate. I backed up, heart pounding, realizing the sound was different from the metal knocks in the warehouse. Someone or something was outside the office now. I checked the locks. Deadbolt secure. Handle twisted. No one could get in. The knocking continued for almost 20 minutes. Intermittent now, moving between the metal office door and the nearest storage units. I stayed crouched behind my desk, flashlight trembling in my hand. Every little noise, the hum of the lights, the drip of condensation, a distant truck engine felt amplified, as if part of the warehouse itself was alive. At 1:50 a.m., I finally dared to move. I grabbed a metal rod from under the desk, intending to walk down the nearest aisle. The second I stepped into the warehouse, the knocking stopped. Silence. Complete, unnatural silence. My footsteps sounded deafening in the empty space. I crept down the aisle, heart racing, shining the flashlight. Every unit was locked. Nothing moved. No shadows. Yet I felt a presence, patient, deliberate, as if it was following me, just out of reach. Around 2:30 a.m., I returned to the office. My body was shaking. I had to survive the rest of the shift. I stayed at my desk, radio and flashlight at the ready. The knocking didn't return immediately, but I could feel it, lingering in the walls, the air in my chest. When 5:15 a.m. finally came, and the morning shift arrived, I didn't say a word. I packed my things silently, refusing to look back. Security cameras recorded nothing unusual that night. Motion sensors never tripped. Doors and locks remained intact. I never returned to that warehouse for night shifts. Even now, months later, when I pass by empty industrial buildings at night, I remember the patient, deliberate knocking. Tap, 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 waiting, moving, watching. And I know that if I ever ignored it or responded, it wouldn't end well. The room at mile marker 72. I had been driving all day along Route 212, a lonely stretch of highway that winds through dense forests and stretches of open land. It was early December, around 10:45 p.m., and I was exhausted from nearly 10 hours of driving. The sky was dark, clouds heavy with snow, and the road slick from freezing rain. I knew I couldn't make it to the next town before midnight. So I started scanning for a motel. Around 11:20 p.m., I saw it, a small, aged motel with a flickering vacancy sign at mile marker 72. The building was tired-looking peeling paint. Neon sign buzzing, but it promised warmth and safety. I parked in front and stepped inside. The lobby smelled faintly of mold and stale coffee. The clerk was an older man, thin, with deep lines on his face. I asked for a room for the night. He gave me a key to room 7, warning me that the building was old and that the heat might be inconsistent. The hallway to my room was dimly lit, the carpet worn and the walls scuffed. Room 7 was small, with 2 twin beds, a cracked bathroom mirror, and a window facing the empty parking lot. I locked the door, turned on the space heater, and tried to relax, sipping from a thermos of coffee I had brought from the road. Around 12:05 a.m., I heard a soft knock on the door. Knock. I froze, the mug halfway to my lips. My first thought was another guest or a maintenance worker. But the hallway outside was silent. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. The knocking repeated, slightly louder. Knock, 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 slow, deliberate. My stomach dropped. I locked the door again, even though the deadbolt was already engaged. The knocking stopped. I told myself it was a prank, maybe some kid outside throwing rocks. But the motel was isolated, miles from any town, and the parking lot was empty. Around 12:30 a.m., I got up to grab a blanket from the closet when I heard it again, this time from the window. Tap, tap, tap. My heart jumped. I didn't dare look. I could see nothing outside. The parking lot was dark and empty, save for my car. The wind rattled the glass, but the taps were too deliberate, too measured. I went back to bed, heart pounding. Every creak in the old building sounded amplified. The heater rattled, the pipes groaned, and the wind howled outside. But beneath all that was another sound, soft, deliberate, waiting. Around 1:10 a.m., the knocking returned, this time from the door. I stayed frozen, clutching my phone, though there was no signal. Tap, tap, tap. It was methodical, almost impatient now, like someone or something was testing me. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. Silence. But I could feel it outside, patient, deliberate. I felt the weight of it pressing against the door, waiting for me to react. At 1:45 a.m., I got up to investigate. I cracked the door slightly. Empty hallway. Nothing. My flashlight revealed nothing. No footprints, no shadows. I even checked the room across the hall. Room 8 was empty. The hall remained silent. I returned to my room, trying to convince myself to sleep. But at 2:15 a.m., the knocking started again, louder, more urgent. Tap, 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 this time from both the door and the walls. My heart raced. I grabbed a metal lamp and stayed on edge, listening. The sound was patient, deliberate, moving from wall to door, as if something was pacing outside. Waiting. Around 2:50 a.m., I finally made a mistake. I whispered, half out of desperation, "Just leave me alone." The knocking stopped immediately. Silence. The kind of silence that makes every nerve in your body scream. I stayed frozen, watching the door, listening. Then, slowly, a scraping sound came from the window, a slow, deliberate slide across the glass, like fingernails or metal. I backed away, realizing with a cold certainty that whatever was outside wasn't human, or at least not normal. My chest tightened. Fear gripped every muscle. I crouched near the bed, lamp in hand, praying the night would end. At 3:30 a.m., I heard a whisper, soft, low, almost playful, "Come out." I froze. The sound seemed to echo, coming from both outside the door and inside the room. My hands shook, sweat on my brow. The heater rattled violently, then died, leaving the room in cold darkness. The wind howled outside. By 4 a.m., the knocking stopped. Complete silence. I didn't sleep. I kept the lamp and the blanket pressed against me, eyes on the door. I didn't dare move. The faint light of dawn eventually filtered through the window. I packed my things silently, unlocked the door, and didn't look back as I ran to my car. The clerk didn't ask questions when I checked out, just handed me the receipt. I never stayed there again. Even now, whenever I drive alone on isolated highways at night, I remember that patient, deliberate knocking, the way it waits, measures, tests, the way it doesn't give up. I still hear it in my mind sometimes, tapping at the door, waiting for someone foolish enough to answer. And I know, if I ever do, I wouldn't make it out alive.